2, 1.
Hi,
We're
everybody.
here.
Welcome. I'd like to welcome my special guest, Chelsea Phillips-Reid, to Netflix and Phil. How are you?
Oh my gosh, Phil, I am so excited to be here. I have been anticipating this day for so long. I'm so excited.
Well, you're my first guest of the new year, so I'm so grateful and thankful to have you. So thank you for taking the time to be with me today. I'm on a new set, and I don't know what I think about it, but it's going to have
I
to
like
work.
it. I see comic books. I see,
Yep.
is that do you have a vision board? What is this?
It's like a collage of pictures and stuff, but I did have a vision board. Do you have a vision board is the question I'm wondering.
I mean, I have a vision board in my mind at all times, but I will say this. In the past, I have gone to vision board parties where we've cut out magazines and done it. And so I did it for 3 years in a row. Didn't do it over the pandemic. Didn't seem like the right time to have any goals besides survival.
Right.
But on one of my vision boards, I cut out the letters HBO because I was obsessed with HBO shows. And I was on an HBO show today, or not today, this year. Was
Yes.
the beginning
So
of my
this
power?
this is it. So this is Netflix and Phil, the HBO Max edition, and we're going to get into that and why here
Yes.
in a moment. So
Okay.
so let's go ahead and kick things off. So I'm going to come to you with my first of all, how did I meet you? Let's just explore that really fast.
Well, we met because you were a guest on my podcast.
Yes.
We're podcast friends. So you, of course, Phil, have been friends with my my co-host Sarah Lowe for years and years. So Sarah and I have a podcast called The Side Hustle with Chelsea and Sarah, and it's a podcast. It's a comedy podcast that explores all the weird, wonderful, sometimes wacky, sometimes terrible jobs that entertainers have to work when they're trying to get the jobs they want, like showbiz jobs. Because no matter who you are, whether you've been on Broadway or a TV show, at some point you've also worked at a child's birthday party or worn a giant Shrek costume that was wet with someone else's sweat.
So I'm going to put in our description below the link to the side hustle that you co-host with Sarah Lowe, so that viewers and listeners can check it out. And I was so thankful to be a guest on it recently. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, Phil, you are a dream. You guys check out Phil's episode because he is hilarious and so joyful. I mean, seriously, we loved it so much. And we had so many people write in and tell us how much they loved it.
Well, and you interview so many people from the Las Vegas community and beyond, I think, about their side hustles. And so thank you for continuing to execute on that.
We've had some really great guests.
Excellent. Well, let's take a deeper dive into you and what you do and your origins. So I want to talk about Tennessee. You're from Oak Ridge, and I want to have you tell me a little about that.
Okay, sure. So I grew up in a small town in Tennessee, to the point my husband is from London, obviously not a small town. Mm-hmm. He came home with me for the first time and he went, "Oh, you didn't tell me you're from a village." So I'm from a village. So Oak Ridge is a tiny town that's in East Tennessee. So we're in the Great Smoky Mountains. I think as an adult, I've come to appreciate it more. When I was a kid, I was like, I cannot wait to get out of here. Right. We have one high school. Everybody knows everybody. It's, sometimes oppressive, I think, to grow up in a town like that.
I think you're absolutely right. And I actually grew up here in Las Vegas, and coincidentally, I had those same feelings and thoughts about wanting to get out of here. But you mentioned coming to reflect on and appreciate your home more. And I find myself reminding myself that Vegas has many positive attributes. What do you love about Oak Ridge?
What I love about Oak Ridge is that it's a really beautiful part of the country. I mean, if you've never been to the Southeast, it's gorgeous. And the Smoky Mountains, it's the most visited national park in America. It's beautiful mountains. I mean, we have fall colors. There's 4 seasons, and Oak Ridge actually has like a fascinating history. If you want to go on a deep dive into Oak Ridge, it's actually kind of cool. So in the 1940s, during World War II, Oak Ridge was a secret city. So Oak Ridge and Los Alamos, New Mexico had nuclear labs where they actually built the atomic bomb.
Oh, wow.
You guys didn't know this was a science podcast. So this tiny little town tucked away in the mountains of Tennessee was part of the Manhattan Project, was a secret city where all these scientists from around the world came and like worked. So again, for a small town, there's a lot of culture, and we had like a symphony, and we had all this different stuff because it's all these people. Like that's how my grandparents met, because it's my step grandpa, but he was a nuclear physicist, no big deal. And then my grandma had lived in North Carolina, and she came over to work in the labs during the war, like being a lab assistant.
There is an attraction there in that vicinity that helped kind of get you started on your path as a singer, etc. So I kind of want to know, what was your experience working for a very famous theme park in that region?
Yes. And I know, Phil, you are being coy, but we're talking, of course, you guys, about Dollywood and the patron saint of Tennessee. And let's face it, America, Dolly Parton. So Dolly is from Sevierville, Tennessee, which is about an hour away from where I grew up. And so from like an early age, like I love Dolly, like in a way that you love a family member. And so again, I grew up just like from, I don't know, I think I was like a toddler. I knew I wanted to perform. I just was that weird kid, like wearing tap shoes in my house, like being like, perhaps someone would like to hear me sing, like just always wanting to perform. And so when I was a little girl, I was 11 years old, Dolly was doing a Christmas show at Dollywood. Okay. Because she was announcing this thing called Imagination Library, which is one of her programs that she started. Because Tennessee is like 50th in literacy. Okay. She wanted to, and Dolly talks about it openly. Her own dad did not know how to read. So fostering a love of reading is so important to her. So every child born in the state of Tennessee is given a book a month until they turn 5. So again, like in case you needed another reason to love Dolly. So when I was 11, I was cast in her Christmas show. So I, did this show with her where we would sing and dance together. And I tell everyone, I'm like, that was my first professional job. And like, what a way to get started, because she is the most incredibly warm and kind and wonderful person. And I have this very vivid memory of, we were in rehearsals. We had learned like the opening number with her stand-in. And then they were like, okay, Dolly's coming this afternoon. And again, I'm 11. So my mom is there with me. And I remember my mom being like, Chelsea, don't be weird. And I was like, hey, it's happening. And so then Dolly comes in and she walks right up to me and she goes, aren't you pretty? And I went, you are too. And she knows everybody's name. She cares about you. She lets you feel seen and appreciated. And again, like when I worked for her, I thought, wow, if this is what entertainment is like, I'm going to love this. Spoiler. Entertainment is not like that. I said this to you before, but you have to plan a trip to Tennessee, because Dollywood is one of the most incredible theme parks in America. Again, it's in the mountains, so it's so beautifully done. There's like trees and it's just so cool. Also, a weird random fact, Dolly is the single biggest conservationist when it comes to bald eagles. So there's a bald eagle sanctuary there. It's mind blowing. And then there's incredible shows where everyone plays live, everyone sings live. Like there's so much live music there. So you guys all go to Dollywood after you finish listening to this, then go to Dollywood. Okay. So great. We're all going to Dollywood. Thank you. I can't wait. I hope I have this correct. So you have experience with perhaps what was a touring production, or maybe it was more centralized, Sesame Street Live. What can you tell us about that? Yeah, so Phil, you did some good research. Yeah. Did I? Okay. You got it right. So this was pretty early on in my career, because so Dollywood is located in like Pigeon Forge, and it's an area, it's kind of like Branson, early like even like Vegas, where it's truly a tourist destination where there's just tons of theaters and tons of opportunities to perform. So I had worked there a little bit. I'd gone to Florida and worked at Busch Gardens and then done a cruise ship. But then I auditioned and I got this job with the touring company of Sesame Street Live. So I got to work for Sesame Street. I played Ginny, the new music teacher that comes to Sesame Street. So I was a live character. So it was me and the Muppets. And this was such an incredible experience because we actually were in Asia. So we started on the West Coast. We were in the West Coast for a little bit. And then we had like a sit down in Singapore, Malaysia, and then we were also in Tokyo. So again, like incredible experiences to get to travel, to get to work for this iconic company that like, I was a live character, but everyone else's voices, I mean, it's Frank Oz, it's all these iconic Muppet, and I grew up watching Sesame Street. So it really was, a really magical moment. And the thing is with those Muppets, everything obviously is pre-recorded on their end. So I will remember that show for the rest of my life because it had to be timed to the second of how you were saying anything, or else Elmo would interrupt you and be like, yeah. And you'd be like, no, I'm acting.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And what a great training ground.
Yeah, I was so lucky. And again, I just had like so many incredible memories. One of the Sultan of Brunei came to see the show when we were in Singapore, and we were like in an arena, but they brought in like lazy boy recliners for the entire royal family to watch the show because they're so royal. They can't sit in seats.
Right.
I mean, it was really, really fun. And again, like what a wonderful company to work for. I've been really lucky.
So, and now you mentioned that you did work on a cruise, and I am a cruiser. Did that come out right? No.
Yeah. So I did that for a long time. So I did my first contract. I worked for Celebrity. So I did those shows on Celebrity. So our job is called a production singer. So on cruise ships, if you guys don't know, they have these like Vegas style shows where it's like, like 12 female dancers and 8 male dancers, and then there's singers. And so it's like a really beautiful show. And then it kind of spoils you for the rest of your life because as a singer, you don't have any other duties. You just do like maybe 3 shows a week. You have guest status, which means you can eat wherever you want on board. You don't have to wear a name tag. You're just like cruising. Imagine my surprise when I come back to land. I'm like, oh no, you work 5 days a week, 6 days a week? Oh no. But again, I think it was such a great experience to have, especially in my early 20s, because I was able to travel. You get so familiar with the island. Like we were in the Caribbean a lot, where it's like, I know exactly where I like to go in San Martin. Like I know all these places to go. And then again, you get to perform. And that's what I love so desperately is I like singing and dancing on a stage. And I also met my sweet husband. So yeah, cruise ship love.
Oh my gosh. So you mentioned your husband, and I was going to ask this later, but since we're on the topic, I learned when I was on your podcast that he's a huge horror film fan.
Very accurate.
How do you tolerate that?
Well, and Phil, because we talked about it on the podcast, I am a huge weenie. I am afraid. I watched the trailer for The Nun and I still think about it, where I'm like, oh, it's so creepy. Oh no. And she was old. No, you guys, my imagination is so overactive that I watched Ghostbusters as a child, like every other kid in America, and like wouldn't sleep with the lights off until I married my husband. And he was like, time to turn the lights off, Chelsea. We're adults. It's rough because I'm afraid of everything, but he usually does it like, it's just like a alone time activity.
Okay. But
I will come home and like look at the history on Netflix and be like, you watched all 6 Hellraisers? And he's like, yeah. For him, it's like background. Like he likes just to have it on. And I'm like, this is what you like screams of horrors and like,
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we talked about Dolly Parton, Sesame Street, working on cruise ships. So tell me, and now, again, I don't know if this is the part of the accurate timeline, but did Vegas come next, or where are we at in your path here now?
It comes next. Of course, there was like some little jaunts here and there in between like cruise ship contracts. I had this like thing where I was like, I want to be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a musical theater program at NYU, and I was like, this is it. I'm legit. And then I was like, this it doesn't mean anything. So I went back on ships. So then we moved to Vegas. So we moved to Vegas about 12 years ago, and we literally just kind of picked it. I had lived in New York, like I said earlier, in my 20s, and New York is so hard and so expensive, and there's rats. People don't talk enough about that there's just like a lot of rat activity. That's horrifying.
I can only imagine, and I'm embarrassed. I've never been to New York City. I know I am a homebody, if you haven't guessed it already, but I'm sure it would be a great education. But I applaud you for doing it, because I have friends that go and similarly have the same experience you did.
And this is the thing, and I think this is like true for most things in life. If you are like independently wealthy, New York is a dream. Sure. If you can like afford anything, then New York is really fun. If you're a college student living on the 5th floor of a pre-war building with no elevator and you eat peanut butter sandwiches every day, it sucks. And again, my husband is from London, which again is like obviously like a huge metropolitan city that's like very expensive and blah, blah, blah. So we picked Vegas because we were like, where can we live that like I can perform and you can work? And so we moved here with like 5 suitcases and a dream.
Oh,
I know.
Let's get into that dream. So I have a guess as to what your first gig was here in the city, but maybe I have it wrong. I have Vegas the show.
Okay, so that came later. That came like a year later. So you were like almost right. So my very first like job in the city is I worked at the Rio. They still do. They have this program called bevertainment.
Okay, now is this like a side hustle? Would you categorize this as a side hustle?
I mean, it was a side hustle, but at the time it was my front hustle because it was like my full-time job, because I was just auditioning. I was like trying to get a show, because a lot of times people don't realize that when you don't work in entertainment is like, there's no job security. Like you finish a job and then you're just back to square one where you're like, what am I going to do? Like, so I was just auditioning all the time, but then at night I would work at the Rio. And so basically this job was, you're a cocktail server. You sling drinks at the Rio, but once an hour you have to perform. So you like scamper on top of like slot machines. Mm-hmm. You sing a song or do a dance. People literally look at you like you have 3 heads, or they'll be like, hey, where's my Bud Light? And you'll be like, quiet, calling out around the world. Yeah. And so you're trying to like not lose the will to live, serve drinks and perform. It was a lot. We saw a lot. Those were some strange times.
But I do have a recollection of there being levels where people would just get up and perform as you walk through the casino. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. That's exactly right. Yeah. So then I was so lucky because I like hit the jackpot, because one of the shows I saw when we first moved to town was Vegas the Show, which is at Planet Hollywood, which is just like an iconic Vegas production that kind of celebrates the history of Vegas. And it was like one of those moments, like I remember sitting in the audience and being like, you will be mine. Like, I will get this show. Mm-hmm. And I got it. And I'm so lucky because, again, I mean, so much in our business is just like sheer dumb luck. Like, sure, talent and hard work also matter, but a lot of times it's just they picked you in that day and then you got it. And that's amazing.
I apologize. I have not seen Vegas the Show, but have had a friend or two in it. And is it still running? Is my first question. Okay.
It hasn't come back since the pandemic.
And my understanding is, it was wonderful. I do recall, and you can probably help define this, but wasn't there a section where there was just a collage of implosions that appeared on screen? And you were being serenaded as all the historic Vegas venues were crumbling. Is that right?
You are accurate. That is very, very accurate. So again, like the show would start off and we were in the neon graveyard. And then they kind of talked about like how Vegas history is so rich. And it's a shame because a lot of times Vegas doesn't hold on to their history. They like to blow it up. And so this show really celebrated that. So we were like, each character's from like that, like bygone era of Vegas. So we were never like impersonators, but we sang like, I sang like Keely Smith. Like there was a guy who was Louis Prima. And so we sang like Old Black Magic and stuff like that. Yeah. But then in the show, there was a montage of explosions while someone sang Rocket Man.
I adore this. So now you talked about your cast members. Did you ever encounter or work with Tez Yancy?
I sure did. I love me some Tez.
Oh my God. I adore that man. And he appeared in a horror movie that your husband has probably seen.
Oh my God. Tez with a secret life I don't know about.
So we'll go from that to, so you mentioned your grandmother earlier, and I'm curious, tell me about, she celebrated what birthday recently?
So my sweet grandma Janna just celebrated her 96th birthday.
What?
I know. And she's just like, she's a remarkable woman. And, you know, I grew up with a single mom. And so my grandma was truly like another parent to me. And, you know, I lived with her for a while. She's just the best lady in the whole world.
Grandma Janet. So tell me a little bit about her history, because I'm curious about.
Oh my gosh, Phil, I would love to talk about Grandma Janet because I just was in Tennessee. So, I mean, life is so incredible. And I love knowing people's stories because you hear about stuff and you're like, how can this be real? But my grandma was born in 1926 in a small town called Apex, North Carolina. Her dad was a sharecropper. They had a dirt floor. They didn't have indoor plumbing. I mean, like so many people in that era of the Great Depression, they were literally dirt poor, you know, like just trying to survive. I talked about this on the Side Hustle one time, but like my grandma, we're going on a deep dive. I hope you guys are ready for like a deep dive of Grandma Janna.
No, please.
She weighed 3 pounds when she was born. She was born at home. The midwife told her mother, my great grandma, this baby is going to die. But they gave her what is called a sugar tit, which is a biscuit soaked in milk and whiskey and honey. And they like wrap it in a handkerchief. I mean, you guys, it is so crazy when you think this is like just like one generation away. So she like sucked on this sugar tip because they wrap it in a handkerchief, like they kind of like make it look like a nipple and they give it to the baby because basically it just like soothes the baby so the baby can like die. My grandma slept for 3 days and then woke up and lived.
Oh my gosh, that sugar tit.
I know. Well, and then my grandma always says, she was like, I slept for 3 days because I was drunk. You to an infant. So she was the first person in her family to go to college. She ended up having to leave because they ran out of money. But she, in the 1950s, wanted to be a flight attendant, you know, a stewardess is what they called them. But like at that time, you know, they were like super glamorous. They had to get weighed in. Their bodies had to look a certain way. They had to wear the same red lipstick. My grandma took a Greyhound bus from Atlanta, Georgia to LA by herself for her interview because she worked for this company called Northern Consolidated that later became Alaskan Airlines. So she was a flight attendant in the 1950s. And like one of her outfits was like a snow bunny costume.
Oh no. Oh my gosh.
Yes. So she's just incredible. And, you know, she also, a theme in my family, she was a single mom. She had my mom in LA and then they moved back to Tennessee where she later married my step grandpa. But, you know, she's just one of these women that I admire so much because she does everything with so much grace and so much humor. She like is constantly optimistic and funny. And, you know, again, I feel so lucky that I get to even know her. And, you know, it's hard to see people you love like start to age. And she's so sharp still, like to this day. Like, I mean, she's just like us. And then my favorite Grandma Janet story is that she came to see Magic Mike.